Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we have to go over the potential crazy summer that could be coming to the Montreal Canadiens. We'll be going over that today. So there's a lot to go over. So there's two main things we have to go over. It is the draft and free agency, and the Montreal Canadiens could be making a big splash in both of those categories this summer. Looks like the Montreal Canadiens want some big changes. They bring in Jeff Gorton as the president of hockey operations. He's had some really good success recently with the Blue Jackets. He had it with the Rangers most recently. So now he's coming up to Montreal. He brings in his right-hand man, I guess you could say, his not friend, which he said in his press conference, his not best friend, the new general manager of the Habs, Kent Hughes. So with that said, now that we know who the GM is, he kind of in his press conference was saying we need a lot of change. We need to add guys around our core players, around our Nick Suzuki's, our Alex Romanovs, around our Carey Prices. So those guys probably aren't going anywhere necessarily. And if they move some cap space here before the deadline, could they be in store for some big changes? Maybe guys coming in this summer. I already kind of did a video with this. If you look back last week, my free agency predictions based off of our top 20. I kind of gave a little rundown of some of the guys that'll be available potentially in free agency. And there's four big names we have to go over in free agency. So those four names are Marc-Andre Fleury, Chris Letang, Claude Giroux, and Patrice Bergeron. Now you may be asking yourself, why are we talking about these four guys in particular? Am I Habs fans? Because let's be honest, a lot of you guys watching this video, you're probably Habs fans. You already know where I'm going with this. These are all French Canadians. They're all francophones. So there is some reason to believe that those guys may want to go to Montreal. The Montreal Canadiens recently have been known as a market that is hard to attract players because of how much of under a microscope that the fan base puts the team under. And just all the media and everything else. But if you have French Canadian guys that grew up Canadian fans, it probably isn't that hard of a sell, right? For the right price, and you're going to be wearing this sweater, it may not be too difficult to do. And there's reason to believe that all four of these players very likely could be heading to Montreal. Maybe not all of them, but at the very least, at least one of them, right? So the first one we have to go over is goaltending. We're going to go over Marc-Andre Fleury. So the 37-year-old goaltender, the 2021 Vezina winner for goaltender of the year. He's with the Chicago Blackhawks right now. Probably going to be traded depending on how things go with the Hawks. I would assume he gets traded. But he is finishing up the final year of a 3-year, $21 million contract, a $7 million deal per year. So that $7 million finishes up this year. He does have a modified no-trade clause. I don't think he'll be going to the Habs at the trade deadline. I think he'll be going to somewhere at the trade deadline, a contender as a rental, and he may look at Montreal as a summer option. And I'm prefacing that now because all four of these guys, all of their contracts are ending this summer, and they have not renegotiated contracts with their current team, so there is still reason to believe that they will go to Montreal at this point. So that's the situation with Fleury. There is definitely a possibility that could happen, depending on what happens with Carey Price. Do they add Marc-Andre Fleury on a cheaper contract so he could go to Montreal? I don't know. That is all stuff that is still up in the air. Does Fleury want some more stability? Is he going to keep his family in Chicago? Do they move back to Vegas? This is all stuff that will be going on in Fleury's head at the end of this season. So that is going to be looked at. So Marc-Andre Fleury is the first name. The second name, we're heading to Pittsburgh. Chris Letang. Chris Letang has been a very highly regarded defenseman in the NHL, but he's 34 years old, and there has been some questions about his availability in the lineup for the Penguins really over the past 2 or 3 years at the very least, maybe even 4 or 5 years. So Chris Letang has not been the most healthy for the Penguins, and that's really been the downside to him, which may be good for the Habs as a veteran guy. He's won multiple Stanley Cups, 3 in fact with the Penguins here over their last little run, and he's been a big part of that dynasty for the Penguins, and a top pairing defenseman at the very least, a top 2 pairing. So Chris Letang is a very good defenseman, and he's always been a part of the Penguins organization. He was drafted by the Penguins, and Chris Letang is coming off the final year of an 8-year deal, paying him $58 million over that time, $7.25 million per year for Letang. That was a massive contract at the time. A lot of these deals were back in 2013. The next 3 contracts, other than Fleury, were all 8-year deals that were signed in 2013. So I do want to preface that. So you see the market has changed a little bit, right? So modified no trade clause for Chris Letang that is now turned into a no move clause. So unless Chris Letang waives it, he will not be going anywhere. So there's no weird, he has to pick 12 teams that he's willing to go to or not go to. He has full control the final 3 years of his contract, which means wherever he ends up going as a rental this year, again, it doesn't matter that much. We're looking at more of this summer. And chances are, if he goes to a team as a rental, they won't have the money to re-sign him this summer, which again leads you to believe Montreal could be his home. Chris Letang does have a child. His wife is also French Canadian, which may have some impact there. They're from, very French Canadian. So if any of these guys, I could legitimately see Chris Letang as the most likely to go to Montreal. Now, again, he does have the injury factor, but he has the couple of Stanley Cups, the veteran experience. He could be a very nice, cheaper add for the Montreal Canadiens. And again, his family is definitely rooted in that culture. I could definitely see that happening. I remember there were some videos of his son when he was a little troublemaker when he was younger, and he was speaking French. So that is definitely part of that family, which we'll see what happens here. The next name, we're staying in the state of Pennsylvania, not necessarily Pittsburgh, but we're heading to Philly on the east side of things. Claude Giroux, the captain of the Philadelphia Flyers now for 8 years. He's been with the Flyers organization for 15 years. He was drafted back in, I think, 2004, 2005, somewhere in that time frame. He's been with the Flyers for a very long time. He developed in the AHL with the Phantoms. He has been orange-blooded now for almost 2 decades. It's going to be weird seeing him outside of Philadelphia because it looks like the Flyers will indeed trade him. He's coming off of an 8-year deal, again, signed in 2013, just like Letang, $66.2 million. He was making $8.275 million per season. Claude Giroux has been the backbone of the Flyers organization. A lot of fans in Wells Fargo Arena have been wearing his jersey now for, like I said, almost 2 decades now. He has been a fan favorite there. It would definitely be weird to see him out of Philadelphia, but again, he does have the Francophone connection being from the French-Canadian area, so that is definitely one to keep an eye on. I mean, you look at his name, you could tell pretty clearly, Claude Giroux. He was born to be a Montreal Canadian. I think he could end his career in Montreal. And you look, again, they need some centers. He could definitely fill that void. The Montreal Canadiens need help everywhere, so it's not too hard. You could take any guy from any position and fit them in. It's more of just, is it the right fit for the player? That's really what this comes down to. Now, this is the biggest name out of all the four. Out of the 4 guys I'm mentioning, this is the biggest name. And I know Bruins fans don't like when I make videos about this because the thought of their captain right now leaving definitely hurts. And you look at all these guys. Letang is an alternate captain in Pittsburgh. Claude Giroux has been a captain of the Flyers for almost a decade. And Patrice Bergeron of the Boston Bruins at 36 years old, it's going to be hard to see him ever leave the black and gold up in Boston. But Patrice Bergeron, again, kind of like Giroux, you could tell he has that French-Canadian connection there. He also signed a deal in 2013. He signed an 8-year, $55 million contract. What was a sweetheart contract at the time still looks like a great deal for what Bergeron has done for the Bruins. Coming in at $6.875 million per year, under $7 million per year. That is a great contract. Kind of similar here to Chris Letang, except the other way. So it was a no-move clause at the front half of the contract and is now a modified no-trade clause. Doesn't really matter that much because, again, this would be a summer move for the Montreal Canadiens. But this is something that we will definitely be looking at. Just the thought of Bergeron in Montreal. How crazy is that? And like I said, you look at the leadership here. Fleury, a fan favorite in Vegas for plenty of years, right? And he was a big stable part of the Penguins through the late 2000s, early 2010s, was a first overall pick. Chris Letang, an alternate captain in Pittsburgh on their successful run. Claude Giroux and Bergeron in their respective cities in Philly and Boston have been the captain of their respective organizations. The Habs could turn things around very quickly if they add even just one or two of these guys. Just think about that. What if they added all four? I mean, it's a little bit of a stretch, but man, how interesting would that be? And there's reason to believe that they are doing that. I mean, you look at the fact they're looking to move out Gallagher, who they just signed. If they were to move out Carey Price, you bring in Marc-Andre Fleury, right? So this looks all great on paper, and I know what Habs fans are going to say next. You look at all four of these guys that I mentioned here throughout this video, and I'll have the list up here for you guys. What is the one thing about all four of these guys? Like I said, I just said all these accolades about these guys. It's the number. It's their age. Marc-Andre Fleury is approaching 40 years old. He's 37 years old. Chris Letang, 34 years old. Claude Giroux, also 34 years old. And Patrice Bergeron, for as good as he is still 36 years old. That is fairly old in NHL terms. And the problem is, some of these guys, you run the risk of signing because they are a big name and have been for a long time, are you maybe signing them in the twilights of their contract? You're getting them for the name, the banner you could put on the side of Bell Center, but in a year or two, you sign them to a 3 or 4 year deal, it ends up being like, wow, like that's going to hurt us. And they end up being in the same spot that they are right now. So let me know what you guys think. What do you think of the Montreal Canadiens bringing in these four players? Because, like I said, there's definitely reason to believe they could potentially acquire all four of these players, again, with salary cap moving out. But it's definitely interesting, the thought of the Montreal Canadiens even bringing these guys in. Because, let's be honest, through the 2000s and 2010s, these have been four big-name players for the organization that they have played for. And like I said, you have two captains, an alternate captain, and a former first overall pick in Fleury. That would be critical for this team. But again, it is the age. And when you have guys in your really at this point, late 30s, you're running the risk of things potentially falling apart if you sign them to multi-year deals. On top of that, not only free agency could this be big for the for the Montreal Canadiens. Right now, according to the standings, they're hosting the draft in 2022 in Montreal at the Bell Center. They're currently projected to have the first overall pick. They have the best odds, at the very least, of a first overall pick. That could also change their franchise drastically. So you look at what a fairy tale summer could look like for the Montreal Canadiens. Potentially, if everything went perfect according to a Habs fan's dream, you could potentially have Marc-Andre Fleury as your new goaltender, Chris Letang on the back end as a top 4 defenseman, Claude Giroux and Patrice Bergeron in your top 6, Giroux as a winger, Bergeron as your center to help out Nick Suzuki. Oh yeah, and potentially Shane Wright. How crazy would that be, right? So, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. How much of a stretch is that? Is there a possibility that we see on the side of the Bell Center? I'll probably make a graphic for you guys here in the video. A graphic of potentially Shane Wright, Marc-Andre Fleury, Chris Letang, Claude Giroux, and Patrice Bergeron all in the red and the red and blue for the Habs in the fall of 2022. Let me know what you guys think down below. I know my Habs fans out there, you guys are going to watch this video because you guys always do. My Habs videos always do extraordinarily well. So let me know what you guys think. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you again next time.